The day I was supposed to get married, my fiancé disappeared. Not emotionally. Not metaphorically. Physically. 1 hour before I was meant to walk down the aisle in a rustic vineyard barn in Napa Valley, he stopped answering his phone. The morning had been perfect. California sunlight pouring over endless rows of grapevines. The barn wrapped in ivory drapes and eucalyptus garlands. White wooden chairs lined in perfect symmetry. A string quartet rehearsing Pachelbel like this was going to be the easiest love story ever told. I remember looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, this is it. You did everything right. I had planned this wedding for 11 months. Negotiated contracts myself. Balanced vendor spreadsheets between client meetings at the investment firm. My father had invested heavily in the venue. His only daughter deserved something unforgettable. Unforgettable. That part, at least, came true. At first, we thought he was just late. Ryan had always been careless with time. Charming. Relaxed. The kind of man who made lateness feel like a personality trait instead of disrespect. He's probably having a cigar with the groomsmen, my mother said, already anxious but pretending not to be. But the groomsmen were in the parking lot. Alone. Confused. One of them, Trevor, looked pale. He left early this morning, he said. Said he needed air. Needed air. An hour before his wedding. My father's jaw tightened. I could see the vein pulsing near his temple. He hated incompetence. And he hated public embarrassment even more. Then the whispering started. Phones came out. Not to call him. To record. Someone's cousin had found something online. A live stream. Posted 20 minutes earlier. Reno. A casino. A high-limit poker table. And there he was. My fiancé. Still wearing the rehearsal dinner jacket. Laughing. Drunk. Throwing chips across green felt like our wedding was just another bet. The video zoomed in when he shouted, "If I win this hand, I won't need a prenup anyway." The table erupted in laughter. The comment section was worse. Bro ditching his wedding for blackjack skull. Imagine the bride right now. Oh, she gonna see her why. My hands didn't shake. That's the strange part. I just felt hollow. The barn doors were open, and I could hear guests outside. The string quartet had stopped playing. Conversations turned sharp. Curious. Predatory. My mother began to cry quietly into a handkerchief. My father didn't cry. He exploded. "I will drag him back here myself," he said, already grabbing his car keys. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was humiliation. 200 guests. Business partners. Extended family. My colleagues from the firm. Investors. Clients. Every single one of them about to witness my wedding collapse in real time. I stepped outside before anyone could stop me. The California sun felt cruelly bright. People stopped talking when they saw me in my dress. That dress. Custom lace. Long sleeves. Open back. Tailored to perfection. I had chosen something elegant. Timeless. Controlled. Not dramatic. I didn't want to look desperate. And now I stood there like a public spectacle. Someone whispered, "Is it true?" Another voice, "I heard he's in Nevada." My cousin tried to shield me from cameras. Too late. A group near the bar was already replaying the Reno video at full volume. His voice echoed across the vineyard. "If I win this hand." My father stormed past me toward the parking lot. "I'm going to Reno," he said. "You'll do no such thing," I replied calmly. He stopped. Everyone stopped. That was the first moment I felt something other than shock. Clarity. Ryan hadn't just gambled money. He gambled me. He gambled my family's reputation. He gambled a ceremony built on trust. And he lost. I could already see how this story would spread. Investment analysts left at altar. Bride blindsided. Poor Emma. Poor Emma. I refused to be poor Emma. Inside the barn, the officiant was on the phone, whispering frantically. My mother clutched my arm. "We can cancel. We'll explain. People will understand." No. They wouldn't. People don't remember explanations. They remember spectacle. And I could feel the spectacle forming around me like smoke. A notification buzzed in my bridesmaid's hand. Another video. Ryan again. This time leaning toward the camera. Relax. It's just money. She'll forgive me. He winked. I don't know what hurt more. The betrayal. Or the certainty in his voice. He believed I would wait. He believed I had no pride. That I would cry, postpone, reschedule. That I would still marry him. Because I was stable, reliable, predictable. He thought he knew me. That was his second mistake. The first was Reno. The second was underestimating me. Guests began drifting toward their cars. Whispers turning into phone calls. My father was seconds away from causing a scene that would follow us for years. And that's when I noticed someone standing apart from the chaos. Watching. Not filming. Not whispering. Daniel Hayes. My boss. Senior partner at the investment firm. He had been invited as a courtesy. A family business partner. He was not part of our social circle. Not someone who thrived in vineyard drama. He stood near the edge of the vines, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. While everyone else panicked, he was thinking. I didn't know it yet. But the disaster unfolding in that barn was only the beginning. And the man standing quietly in the vineyard was about to change everything. Daniel didn't rush toward me. He didn't look horrified. He didn't look entertained. He looked analytical. Like he was reviewing a volatile market swing instead of watching my wedding implode. My father was halfway to his car when Daniel intercepted him. Not aggressively. Just enough to block his path. Mr. Carter, he said calmly. If you leave now, you escalate this. My father's voice was sharp. He humiliated my daughter. Yes, Daniel replied evenly. And chasing him across state lines will humiliate her further. I walked toward them, my dress catching on gravel. Every step felt deliberate. I refused to run. Daniel glanced at me briefly. His eyes softened, just for a second, before returning to composure. Emma, he said quietly, you have about 15 minutes before this becomes a permanent headline in your professional circle. He was right. Half our firm was here. 2 managing directors. 3 clients. Assistants who would absolutely talk. The investment world thrives on weakness. And today, I was bleeding in public. What are you suggesting? My father demanded. Daniel hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then he said it. There is one way to stop this. The air felt still. Stop what? I asked. The narrative. He stepped closer, so only we could hear. You don't need a groom who ran to Reno, he said quietly. You need a ceremony that happens. I stared at him. You can't be serious. I am. My father frowned. What exactly are you implying? Daniel exhaled slowly. Let me stand in. The words landed like another explosion. My mother gasped. You're insane, I said. I'm practical, he corrected. The officiant is here. The guests are seated. The press hasn't arrived yet, but phones are recording. If you cancel now, this becomes a viral humiliation. And if I marry my boss? Asked coldly. It becomes a shocking twist, he replied. My father looked between us like we'd both lost our minds. This isn't a boardroom negotiation, he snapped. Daniel met his gaze, without flinching. No. It's damage control. He turned to me fully. You don't owe him tears, he said. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You can walk down that aisle and walk out married. Or you can walk out alone while 200 people dissect you. His tone wasn't emotional. It was precise. Controlled. The way he delivered quarterly projections. Why would you do this? I asked. For your family, he answered smoothly. I held his gaze. That wasn't the full truth. But he wasn't ready to say the rest. My phone buzzed. Another message. Ryan. Babe, relax. I'll be back tonight. Don't overreact. Overreact. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage. Not grief. Resolve. He thought I would wait. He thought I would be grateful if he returned. He thought I had nowhere else to stand. Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts. You don't have to decide in fear, he said quietly. Decide strategically. Strategically. That word steadied me. I had built my career on strategy, risk assessment, long-term positioning. Right now, the greatest risk wasn't marrying Daniel. It was becoming a public victim. What happens tomorrow? I asked him. We file paperwork, he replied calmly. We handle optics. You can annul quietly if you wish. If I wish. He wasn't cornering me. He was offering leverage. My father rubbed his face with both hands. This is madness. No, I said softly. It wasn't. Madness was betting your wedding on a poker hand. This was control. Guests were beginning to stand from their chairs. The string quartet awkwardly tuned their instruments again, unsure. The officiant approached nervously. Are we proceeding? He whispered. I looked at Daniel. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't triumphant. He was steady. Why you? I asked him one last time. He held my gaze a beat too long. Because I won't run, he said. And I believed him. The barn doors creaked in the wind. My father searched my face. Emma, he said carefully, you don't have to do this.
No.
I didn't. That was the difference. Ryan made me feel like I needed him. Daniel was giving me a choice. I turned toward the barn. 200 faces waiting. Phones lifted. Whispers sharp as glass. If I walked out alone, they would pity me. If I walked out furious, they would remember it. But if I walked out composed, they would never forget. I looked back at Daniel. Fine, I said quietly. We do this. My mother gasped again. My father swore, under his breath. Daniel didn't celebrate. He simply nodded once. Then let's not waste time. He adjusted his cufflinks like he was stepping into a meeting, not a wedding. The bridesmaids stared at me in disbelief as I re-entered the bridal suite. Emma, what are you doing? One of them whispered. Controlling the outcome, I replied. They helped fix my veil with trembling hands. Outside, the officiant cleared his throat and addressed the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will begin momentarily. Momentarily. I took a deep breath. My father extended his arm. His anger hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else. Protection. You're certain? He asked quietly. No, I answered honestly. Then I lifted my chin. But I'm not weak. The music began. And when the barn doors opened again, it wasn't for the wedding they expected. It was for something far more unpredictable. The music sounded different the second time. Not romantic. Not hopeful. Sharp. Deliberate. Every step down that aisle felt like a headline rewriting itself in real time. Gasps rippled through the barn the moment people realized the man waiting at the altar wasn't Ryan. It was Daniel. Tall. Composed. In a charcoal suit that suddenly looked suspiciously appropriate for a groom. Someone near the front whispered, "Is that her boss?" Phones lifted higher. I didn't look at anyone except straight ahead. If I faltered now, it would turn into chaos. My father's arm was firm under my hand. Head up, he murmured. I didn't need the reminder. Daniel stood still, hands loosely clasped, expression controlled. But when I reached him, I saw something flicker behind his calm. Not triumph. Responsibility. The officiant blinked twice before continuing. We gather here today. His voice shook for exactly one sentence. Then professionalism kicked in. No one announced the switch. No explanations were given. We behaved as if this had always been the plan. That was the brilliance of it. Confidence erases suspicion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother dabbing tears again, this time from shock rather than humiliation. The groomsmen had no idea where to look. Ryan's parents were frozen in the third row. His mother's face drained of color. Good. Let them sit in it. The officiant leaned toward us subtly. Are we proceeding as scheduled? Daniel answered first. Yes. One word. Steady. Certain. I appreciated that more than I expected. The vows had been written weeks ago. Romantic promises about partnership and trust. Trust. The irony almost made me smile. Daniel's hand brushed mine for the first time when the officiant instructed us to join hands. His grip was warm, grounded, not possessive, not hesitant, just present. Do you, Daniel Hayes, take Emma Carter? There it was. My name paired with his. The barn held its breath. I do. No pause. No tremor. Clear. The guests erupted into confused murmurs before quickly silencing themselves. The officiant turned to me. My mind flashed to Reno, to Ryan laughing under casino lights. If I win this hand, he thought I'd wait. He thought I'd cry. Instead, I heard my own voice. I do. Stronger than I expected. The officiant looked relieved, like he just wanted this to end without legal liability. The shortened ceremony skipped the personal readings. No unity candle. No sentimental childhood stories. Just the essentials. The air felt electric. Scandal turning into spectacle. But not the kind anyone predicted. When Daniel slid the ring onto my finger, his hand didn't shake. I noticed everything in that moment. The faint scent of cedar from the barn beams. The way sunlight filtered through dust particles in golden streaks. The sound of someone's phone notification going off and quickly silenced. By the power vested in me, the words felt surreal. You may kiss the bride. There was a fraction of a second where we both calculated. A staged marriage still required a kiss. Daniel stepped closer slowly. He didn't grab me. He didn't rush. He gave me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips touched mine gently. Brief. Controlled. Enough to convince. Applause exploded. Not polite applause. Wild, stunned, adrenaline-fueled applause. People love a twist. Especially when it saves them from witnessing a breakdown. I turned to face the crowd as Daniel's hand rested at the small of my back, steady but respectful. The humiliation that had been building an hour ago had transformed into something else. Shock. Awe. Confusion. No one would be posting a crying bride video now. They would be posting. Her groom ran away, and she married someone else. And suddenly, I wasn't a victim. I was unpredictable. My father stepped forward first, hugging me tightly. Then he shook Daniel's hand. A silent agreement passed between them. Protect her. Ryan's mother stood abruptly and walked out of the barn. I watched her go without emotion. Her son made his choice in Reno. I made mine here. As we walked back down the aisle together, Daniel leaned slightly toward me. You're doing very well, he murmured. So are you, I replied. The string quartet, bless them, played louder than ever. Outside, guests clustered in disbelief. Questions started forming. How long have you two? Was this planned? What happened to? Daniel handled it smoothly. There was a change of plans, he said evenly. But we're grateful you're here. No details. No drama. Just control. I realized something important in that moment. Ryan would have over-explained. Over-joked. Over-performed. Daniel didn't. He managed the room like he managed markets, minimized panic. Project stability. And people follow. Champagne was poured. The photographer, wide-eyed but professional, kept shooting. The vineyard backdrop looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier. But the narrative had shifted completely. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. What the hell is happening? I locked the screen without replying. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of power return to me. Not because I married Daniel, but because I refused to crumble. As guests moved toward the reception tables, I leaned closer to him. Are you sure about this? I asked quietly. His jaw tightened just slightly. I don't step into things I'm unsure about, he said. That wasn't the romantic answer. It was something better. Certain. The barn that almost witnessed my humiliation was now hosting my wedding reception. And no one, not even me, fully understood what we had just set into motion. The reception began like nothing had collapsed an hour earlier. White tablecloths. Crystal glasses. Golden California light pouring through the barn windows. If someone had arrived late, they would have assumed this wedding had always belonged to Daniel. That was the terrifying part. How quickly people adjust to a new reality. We were announced as husband and wife. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. The name felt foreign in my ears. But I didn't flinch. Daniel's hand rested lightly at my waist as we walked toward the head table. Not possessive. Not performative. Measured. Across the room, I could see guests recalibrating their opinions in real time. Investors whispered. My coworkers stared. Some looked impressed, others suspicious. Ryan's empty chair had been removed. Efficient. Daniel leaned slightly toward me as we sat. Eat something, he murmured. You haven't all day.
It startled me.
Ryan never noticed when I skipped meals. He noticed when I disagreed with him. He noticed when I outperformed him in conversation. But hunger? Fatigue? Never. I'm fine, I replied automatically. You're in shock, Daniel said quietly. Adrenaline fades. There was no judgment in his tone, just observation. The first speech came from my maid of honor. She was pale but determined. To Emma, she said, raising her glass. The strongest woman I know. Applause. Her voice wavered only once. She didn't mention Ryan. No one did. My father stood next. The barn quieted instantly. He held his glass but didn't drink. I raised my daughter to think clearly under pressure, he said. Today, she proved she can. His eyes moved to Daniel. And a man who stands firm in chaos deserves respect. The message was clear. This was no accident anymore. It was a decision. Daniel nodded once. Then it was his turn. The room held its breath again. He stood slowly, adjusting his cuff. No paper. No rehearsed romance. When I agreed to attend this wedding, he began calmly, I didn't expect to leave married. A ripple of nervous laughter. But I've worked with Emma for 5 years. My heart skipped. 5 years. He continued. I've watched her negotiate multi-million-dollar deals without raising her voice. I've watched her stay late so her team could go home early. I've seen her choose principle over convenience. The room grew still. She doesn't panic. She assesses. She acts. His eyes met mine. And today she acted. This wasn't a love speech. It was something more intimate. Recognition. I won't pretend this was conventional, he added. But I will say this. I don't make impulsive investments. Soft laughter again. I invest in long-term value. The words settled in my chest. Long-term. He raised his glass toward me. To strength. And to new beginnings. Applause thundered louder this time. And something shifted inside me. This wasn't just damage control anymore. This felt intentional. Music started. Our first dance. There had been a playlist prepared weeks ago. Ryan had chosen an upbeat song. Daniel leaned closer. Do you want to change it? I considered. No, I said finally. Let's keep it. The music filled the barn. We stepped onto the dance floor. 200 eyes locked onto us. Daniel's hand slid to my waist again, firmer this time, guiding but never forcing. I'll follow your lead, he murmured. You're taller, I replied. He almost smiled. We moved carefully at first. Then naturally. He was a surprisingly good dancer. Steady rhythm. Controlled steps. No flashy spins. No showmanship. Ryan used to twirl me dramatically, like we were auditioning for applause. Daniel kept me grounded. You don't look scared, he said quietly as we turned. I'm not, I answered. That surprised me. I wasn't. I was alert, aware, but not afraid. Ryan will call, Daniel added. He already has. And I didn't answer. His grip tightened slightly, not possessively but approvingly. You don't owe him closure, he said. I know. The song ended. Applause again. More champagne. More whispers. But now the whispers carried admiration instead of pity. As the night unfolded, we played our roles flawlessly. At the cake table, he fed me a small bite without smearing frosting on my face. During photos, his hand rested naturally at my lower back. When distant relatives asked invasive questions, he redirected them with polite deflection. He never lied. He simply didn't explain. At one point, I stepped outside for air. The vineyard was quiet now. Sunset painted the sky in amber and rose. I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel, you should be inside, I said without turning. You needed a moment. I faced him. The barn lights glowed behind him, outlining his silhouette. Why did you really do this? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. For the first time all day, he looked vulnerable. "I've admired you for a long time," he said finally. The honesty landed softly, not dramatically. "You're disciplined," he continued. "You're fair. You don't use emotion as leverage." I crossed my arms slightly. "That sounds like a performance review." A faint smile. "It's not." Silence stretched between us. "Ryan never deserved you," he added quietly. That statement didn't feel like flattery. It felt like fact. Inside, laughter erupted from the dance floor. The party was in full swing, as if chaos had never touched it. "You understand this might end in annulment," I said. "I understand," he replied. "And you're fine with that?" "I don't step into things I don't believe in." Again, that certainty. I studied him more carefully. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't trying to save me like some dramatic hero. He saw a collapsing structure, and he reinforced it. That's what he does. That's who he is. When we returned inside, something felt different. The performance wasn't heavy anymore. It flowed. When he laughed at something my cousin said, it wasn't forced. When I leaned into him during a photo, it wasn't calculated. The act was becoming easier, natural. And that realization unsettled me more than the wedding disaster itself. Near midnight, the planner approached us nervously. "There's one issue," she whispered. "All nearby hotels are fully booked. Wine festival this weekend." Of course. Chaos doesn't arrive alone. "There's a small lakeside motel about 20 minutes away," she added apologetically. "It's not luxury." Daniel glanced at me. I almost laughed. After today, luxury was irrelevant. "That's fine," I said. We said goodbye to the guests under sparklers. A cliché ending to a completely unplanned beginning. As we drove away from the vineyard, I looked at my reflection in the car window. Still in my wedding dress. Still married. But not to the man I had expected. Daniel kept his eyes on the road.
Calm.
Focused. The barn grew smaller in the rearview mirror. The humiliation had been replaced by something else entirely. Not certainty. Not yet. But possibility. And possibility, I was beginning to realize, can be far more dangerous than heartbreak. The motel sign flickered. That was the first thing I noticed. Blue neon. Half the letters dim. Lakeview and buzzing against the dark California sky, like it was unsure whether to stay lit or give up. It felt strangely appropriate. Daniel parked the car without comment. No valet. No marble lobby. No champagne waiting upstairs. Just gravel under tires and the distant sound of water moving against the shore. For a moment, neither of us opened the doors. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy. We had just rewritten both our lives in under 6 hours. "I can book you a separate room," he said finally.
Calm.
Practical. I turned toward him. "You think that's necessary?" "I think you've had enough chaos for one day." There it was again. Consideration without pressure. Ryan would have turned this into a joke. Something suggestive. Something immature to lighten tension. Daniel treated the moment like it mattered. "I don't want to hide," I said quietly. He studied my face, searching for hesitation. There wasn't any. We walked into the lobby together. The receptionist looked up, bored, then did a double take when she saw the dress. "Wedding?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel replied smoothly. "Congratulations." No suspicion. No whispers. Just two strangers checking into a cheap motel like any other couple. The room smelled faintly of detergent and lake air. One queen bed. A small wooden table. Thin curtains shifting slightly from the breeze through a cracked window. I slipped off my heels first. The relief was immediate. Daniel set his jacket on the chair and loosened his tie. We didn't look at each other for several seconds. The adrenaline was finally fading. And with it, the performance. "I keep waiting to wake up," I admitted quietly. "You won't," he replied. I let out a small breath. "Do you regret it?"
No.
He didn't hesitate. That steadiness again. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The lake reflected moonlight in fractured silver lines. "Ryan texted 17 times," I said. Daniel didn't ask what the messages said. "What are you going to do?" he asked instead. Nothing. The word surprised even me. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Nothing. Silence can be sharper than anger. I turned back toward him. The room felt smaller now. More intimate. We need to talk about tomorrow, I said. Annulment. Statements. The firm. He nodded. I've already thought about that. Of course he had. I'll transfer you out of my direct reporting line, he continued. Immediately. No one can say this was coercive or inappropriate. I blinked. You'd give up managing my portfolio? Yes. That wasn't a small thing. My division handled some of the firm's largest accounts. Control in that world meant influence. Influence meant power. You don't have to. I do, he interrupted gently. If this is going to survive scrutiny, it has to be clean.
Clean.
Professional. Protected. He wasn't thinking about gossip. He was thinking about my career. The realization settled deep. You planned fast, I said. I react fast, he corrected. A beat passed. Then he added quietly, but I didn't step in only because of optics. There it was. The part he hadn't said in the vineyard. I held his gaze. Then why? He exhaled slowly, like he'd rehearsed this conversation in his head long before tonight. I've watched you choose men who underestimated you, he said. I've watched you defend Ryan in meetings when he made careless comments. I've watched you minimize yourself, so he wouldn't feel threatened. Each word was precise. Not cruel. Accurate. He didn't deserve access to you, Daniel continued. And you do. I asked not softly. He didn't flinch. I deserve the chance to be honest. Silence. The motel air hummed quietly. For 3 years, he said, I kept this professional. Because you were engaged. Because I respect boundaries. 3 years. I searched my memory. Late nights at the office. Subtle glances across conference tables. Moments I dismissed as imagination. You never said anything, I whispered. It wasn't appropriate. And today is? A faint, almost ironic smile touched his mouth. Today was necessary. That word again. Not romantic. Necessary. But the truth is, he said, voice lowering slightly, I didn't just step in to save your reputation. My heartbeat shifted. I stepped in because the thought of you standing alone in that barn, he paused, jaw tightening slightly. It wasn't acceptable to me. Not acceptable. Not because of pride. Because of care. The room felt warmer. I don't want you to feel obligated, he added. If you want this annulled next week, I'll sign whatever is needed. He meant it. I could see it. No manipulation. No urgency. Just space. And somehow that made it harder to breathe. I don't want to annul immediately, I heard myself say. His eyes sharpened slightly. Why? Because when you kissed me, it didn't feel fake. Because you're the first man who reacted to my humiliation with strategy instead of ego. Because tonight I feel safer than I have in months. But I didn't say any of that. Because I don't make impulsive reversals, I replied instead. A quiet understanding passed between us. Time, I added. Let's give it time. He nodded once. Time, he agreed. We didn't rush into the bed. We sat at the small wooden table first. Talking. About practicalities. About the firm. About how tomorrow's headlines would spin. But gradually, the conversation softened. Less about optics. More about us. He told me about growing up in a family where emotional weakness was punished. I told him about always feeling like I had to be the stable one in every relationship. He admitted he admired my restraint. I admitted I was tired of being the responsible one for 2 people. Somewhere past midnight, the distance between us dissolved naturally. Not out of obligation. Not out of drama. But because the performance had already transformed into something real. When he finally brushed his fingers against my hand again, it wasn't staged. It was intentional. I won't hurt you, he said quietly. The simplicity of that promise nearly broke me. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was calm. I believed him. Outside, the lake moved gently under moonlight. Inside that small, imperfect motel room, The most impulsive day of my life settled into something unexpectedly steady. I married him to stop a disaster. But as I lay beside him in the quiet dark, listening to his breathing even out, I began to wonder whether disaster had been the only way this could ever begin. The morning after my wedding didn't feel like a honeymoon. It felt like a board meeting after a hostile takeover. My phone started vibrating at 6:12 a.m. News alerts,
Group chats.
missed calls. Headlines were already forming. Bride marries boss after groom flees to Reno. Runaway groom shocked as ceremony continues without him. The internet loves a collapse. But it loves a twist even more. Daniel was already awake when I opened my eyes. Sitting at the small table. Laptop open. Reading. "You slept?" he asked without looking up. "Some." He turned the screen slightly toward me. The videos were circulating everywhere. The casino clip. My walk down the aisle. The kiss. Side by side. Two narratives colliding. I expected shame. Instead, I felt something colder.
Detachment.
Ryan had texted all night. Anger first. Then panic. Then apologies. Then rage again. "You embarrass me." That one made me smile. I embarrassed him. For once. Daniel closed the laptop gently. "I've already contacted HR," he said. "Your department transfer will be announced today." You move fast. I remove leverage before its use. That was the difference between them. Ryan reacted. Daniel anticipated. Back in Napa, the vineyard staff had already cleared the barn. The wedding that almost became a disaster was now a story people retold with fascination. By the time we drove back toward the city, my humiliation had transformed into something else entirely. My father called first. "I misjudged him," he said bluntly. He didn't specify which man. He didn't need to. My mother cried again, but this time from relief. "You didn't look broken," she kept repeating. I wasn't. And that realization scared me. Because if I wasn't broken by Ryan disappearing, what else had I tolerated without noticing? At the firm, the atmosphere was electric. Whispers cut off when I walked by. Eyes followed. But not with pity. With curiosity. Daniel didn't walk beside me in the lobby. He kept distance. Professional. Measured. In the conference room later that afternoon, HR made the announcement. Effective immediately, Emma will report to the West Coast Strategy Division.
Clean.
Formal. Untouchable. After the meeting, one of my colleagues leaned toward me. "Did you always have this planned?" I held her gaze evenly.
No.
And that was the truth. But what I didn't say was this. I had always planned to survive. That instinct had been there long before Daniel. Long before Ryan. It just took a public collapse for me to see it clearly. That night, back at my apartment, now technically ours, I walked through the living room slowly. Ryan's things were still in a box near the door. Cufflinks. Spare shoes. A watch he'd left behind. I felt nothing. No nostalgia. No longing. Only clarity. I remembered every time he'd corrected me in front of friends. Every joke about my intensity. Every subtle suggestion that I was lucky he loved someone so driven. Lucky. I wasn't lucky. I was convenient. He liked that I handled logistics. That I managed finances. That I absorbed pressure. So he didn't have to. And I had mistaken that dynamic for partnership. Daniel stood in the doorway quietly. "You don't have to keep any of it," he said. "I know." I picked up the watch and placed it back in the box. Not angrily. Just decisively. "He called my father today," Daniel added. "That caught my attention. And demanded to speak to you. Claimed you were unstable. That you acted irrationally under stress."
Of course he did.
If a man can't control the narrative, he attacks credibility. I laughed softly. I expected that. Daniel studied me carefully. "You're not shaken."
No.
That surprised both of us. Because a week ago, I would have been. I would have questioned myself. Second-guessed my response. Wondered if I had overreacted. But I hadn't overreacted. I had adjusted. Ryan gambled. I recalculated. That night, Daniel and I ate takeout on the floor because the dining table was still covered in unopened wedding gifts. We talked about practical things again. Legal paperwork, press inquiries, asset separation from Ryan. Then, somewhere between discussing joint accounts and deleting old photos, something shifted. You know, Daniel said quietly, you don't have to be strong every minute. I looked at him carefully. What does that mean? It means you don't have to perform composure for me. The word perform lingered. Was I performing? Maybe. For years. With Ryan, I had been the responsible one. The planner. The emotional stabilizer. Even at my own wedding, I managed optics instead of collapsing. I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't know how to fall apart. Not safely. Not without being judged. Daniel reached across the space between us and gently brushed his thumb against my wrist. No urgency. No demand. You deserved better long before yesterday, he said. That's when it hit me. Ryan hadn't just abandoned the ceremony. He had been slowly eroding me for years. Little dismissals. Little jokes. Little shifts in power. And I had accepted them because they weren't dramatic enough to label as harm. Daniel didn't rescue me. He exposed the imbalance. The fake marriage wasn't what changed me. It revealed me. I leaned back against the couch and studied him. You didn't just save the ceremony, I said quietly. No, he replied. I know. The room felt different now. Not staged. Not strategic. Personal. And for the first time since the vineyard, I allowed myself to feel something unstructured. Relief. Not because I was married, but because I was no longer shrinking. Ryan believed I'd forgive him. That I'd wait. That I'd choose familiarity over dignity. He underestimated me. Daniel didn't. That was the turning point. Not the kiss. Not the vows. But the realization that I was no longer willing to be chosen last. And as Daniel stood to clear the empty containers, moving through my kitchen like he belonged there, I understood something with absolute certainty. This marriage may have begun as an act, but I was no longer pretending. Ryan showed up on a Thursday, unannounced, unshaven, wearing the same leather jacket he used to throw over his shoulders like it made him look rebellious instead of irresponsible. He was standing outside my building when I returned from work. I saw him before he saw me, and I felt nothing. No racing heart. No panic. Just irritation that he hadn't learned when to stop. Daniel noticed him at the same moment. He didn't tense. He didn't step in front of me like some territorial display. He simply slowed his pace and let me decide. Ryan turned, relief flashing across his face like I was still his solution.
Emma.
Finally. His voice cracked slightly. Interesting. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy, I replied calmly. His eyes shifted to Daniel. There it was. Jealousy. Possessiveness. Disbelief. This is insane, Ryan said, running a hand through his hair. You married him out of spite. No, I answered evenly. I married him because you left. That was a mistake, he insisted quickly. I panicked. It was stupid. I was drunk. And in Reno, I added quietly. He flinched. I came back, he said defensively. I was on my way back. To what? I asked. He opened his mouth.
Closed it. Exactly.
You humiliated me, he tried again. You could have waited. Waited. For him. Like I always had. Daniel remained silent beside me. He wasn't rescuing. He wasn't interfering. He was respecting my battle. You gambled our wedding, I said calmly. You gambled my reputation. And then you assumed I would forgive you. Ryan's jaw tightened. You don't throw away a relationship over one mistake. One mistake. As if the casino video existed in isolation. As if years of subtle erosion didn't matter. You didn't lose me in Reno, I said quietly. You lost me long before.
His tone shifted then.
Sharper. Accusatory. You've always been dramatic under pressure. Your father even said you get emotional. That was new. He was building a narrative. Unstable. Impulsive. Emotional. Of course. If he couldn't win me back, he could at least question my credibility.
Daniel stepped forward then.
Not aggressively. Just enough. Careful, he said calmly. Ryan scoffed. Oh, you think this is real? You think she actually loves you? Daniel's expression didn't change. This isn't about me, he replied evenly. It's about you refusing accountability. Ryan laughed bitterly. You stole my wedding. Daniel's voice stayed level. You abandoned it.
Silence.
Sharp and final. Ryan's eyes moved back to me. Emma, please. We can fix this. There was desperation now, not love.
Control slipping.
My father's car pulled into the driveway at that exact moment. Perfect timing. He stepped out, already furious. I thought I made myself clear, he said coldly. Ryan straightened. Sir, I just need 5 minutes. You needed 5 minutes before you ran to Reno, my father snapped. The tension thickened. Neighbors were watching now. Windows shifting. Phones lifting. Ryan lowered his voice. I made a mistake, he repeated. Don't ruin everything over pride.
Pride.
I almost smiled. He still believed this was ego, not dignity. You ruined it, I said softly. My father moved closer, voice firm and final. Leave. Ryan hesitated, looked at me one last time, searching for weakness, for hesitation. He didn't find it, and when he finally walked away, shoulders tense and rigid, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, release. Inside the apartment, the air felt lighter. My father turned to Daniel. I misjudged you, he admitted bluntly. Daniel nodded respectfully. Understandable. After my father left, I leaned against the door. That won't be the last attempt, I said quietly. No, Daniel agreed. He walked to the kitchen counter and placed a folder down. What's that? I asked. Your transfer documentation, he replied. It's effective immediately. I frowned slightly. That was fast. I don't want anyone suggesting you married for advantage, he said. Or that I used authority. He was giving up power again. Deliberately. You're moving me to the strategy division, I said. Yes. That's your strongest sector. And now it's yours. I looked at him carefully. You're dismantling any imbalance. Yes. Not defensive. Not grand. Just clear. Why? I asked softly. Because if this becomes real, he said, holding my gaze steadily, it has to be built on choice. Not dependency.
Choice.
Not dependency. Ryan needed me dependent. Needed me waiting. Needed me forgiving. Daniel was removing every structural advantage he had over me.
That wasn't romantic.
It was intentional integrity. My phone buzzed again. A message from Ryan. I won't give up. I blocked him. No speech. No announcement. Just silence. Daniel watched me do it. And something shifted between us. Not dramatic. Not explosive. But decisive. The past had shown up. Demanded attention. Tried to rewrite history. And failed. That night, as we sat together without speaking much, I realized something important. Closure doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it comes with a door closing quietly. And staying closed. The silence, after blocking Ryan, felt different from the silence in the vineyard. Back then, silence was shock. Now it was power. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. Internet attention shifted to the next scandal. But real life doesn't fade as quickly as news cycles. The firm adjusted to our new structure. I moved into the strategy division. No special treatment. No protective bubble. If anything, the scrutiny intensified. People expected favoritism. They expected cracks. They expected regret. They didn't get any. Daniel kept his distance at work. Professional. Impeccable. In meetings, he challenged my projections like he would anyone else. If anything, he was harder on me. And I appreciated it. Because it proved something important. This wasn't a rescue operation.
It was a partnership.
At home, things unfolded more quietly. No dramatic declarations. No impulsive romance. Just consistency. He cooked when I worked late. I reorganized his chaotic bookshelf. We argued once about investment risk allocation, and it felt strangely intimate. Ryan tried one more time. An email this time.
Long.
Apologetic. Blaming stress. Blaming alcohol. Blaming fear. But not once did he say, "I underestimated you." He still believed this was about his panic, not my worth.
I didn't reply.
Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer and finalized the legal separation of assets.
Clean.
Final. No theatrics. My father invited Daniel to dinner 2 weeks later. A test disguised as hospitality. I watched them carefully across the table. My father asked direct questions. About intention. About stability. About long-term plans. Daniel answered without embellishment. "I didn't step in to replace someone," he said calmly. "I stepped in because she deserved better than being abandoned." No grand romance. No ego. Just fact. My mother watched me more than she watched him, as if measuring whether I looked trapped. I didn't. I looked steady. After dinner, as we drove home, Daniel glanced at me briefly. "You don't owe me permanence," he said quietly. I turned toward him. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because I don't want you staying out of obligation." There it was again.
Choice.
He kept handing it back to me. And that's when I understood something clearly. The fake marriage had protected me. But staying married would be a decision. And decisions define character. One evening, nearly a month after the wedding, we walked back to the vineyard. Not for an event. Just us. The owner had allowed it. The barn was empty now. Quiet. Sunlight filtering through wooden beams again. The same place where everything fell apart. And rebuilt. I stepped into the center of the aisle. No chairs. No guests. No cameras. Just open space. Daniel stood a few feet away. "You can leave," he said softly. "If you want a clean reset. No one would blame you." I looked around the barn. I remembered the whispers. The humiliation. The moment I chose not to collapse. Then I looked at him. The man who didn't chase. Didn't pressure. Didn't claim ownership. He had transferred my department. Faced public scrutiny. Stood calmly while my past tried to rewrite me. Not once had he demanded gratitude. Not once had he leveraged the fact that he saved my reputation. "You keep giving me exits," I said quietly. "Yes."
Why?
"Because I want you to stay for the right reason." Silence settled between us.
Soft.
Intentional. I walked toward him slowly. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Deliberately. "This isn't damage control anymore," I said.
No.
"This isn't pride.
No.
And it's not about proving Ryan wrong." His jaw tightened slightly.
No.
I stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the steady warmth of him. "It's about choosing someone who never wanted me small." For the first time since that day in Napa, his composure cracked just slightly. Not loss of control. Just relief. "I love you," he said quietly. No performance. No urgency. Just truth. The words didn't shock me. They settled. Like something that had been forming long before either of us admitted it. "I know," I replied. Then I added, without hesitation, "I love you too." Not because he rescued me. Not because he stood at the altar. But because he never needed me diminished to feel secure. We didn't kiss immediately. We just stood there. In the same barn that almost became my humiliation. And I felt something stronger than revenge.
Peace.
Ryan had gambled on my predictability. He believed I would wait. He believed I would forgive. He believed I needed him. He was wrong. I didn't destroy him. I didn't scream. I didn't chase. I didn't beg. I chose. And that choice changed everything. What began as a desperate cover became a deliberate future. Not because I was saved, but because I refused to be small. And this time, I wasn't walking down the aisle to avoid disaster. I was walking forward
Because I wanted to.